Now, I'm not one to use today's vernacular, simply put, because I'm old. But the gentleman I have for you now to kick off hour two of this Thursday edition of Snowman in the Morning is one of my day ones because he was around when I first launched this show 10 years ago. And to say that he and I have been through a lot personally and together would be a horrible understatement. Please help me welcome one of the creators of the Lyle Files, Mr. Michael Lyle himself. Good morning, brother. How are you?
Oh, good morning. Well, good afternoon to you, actually. But good morning, good afternoon, whatever it is. But it's great to be back with you. As I mentioned off the side, it's been so long since I've been back on program, but it's great to be back. Great to be back.
It's great. It's great to have you back. I don't even know where to begin. It's been so long. I mean, you were around when I first launched this show. 10 years. Can you believe it's been 10 seasons doing this?
It has been a long time. You're right. It has been that long. I cannot even believe it. Doesn't even feel like it's been 10 years. 10 years? A decade? Are you sure it's been a decade,
This
man?
is this is my 10th year
Wow.
doing doing this. My wife asked me the same question. She says, "You sure this is your 10th year?" I'm like, "Yeah, this is my 10th year. Yeah, about to head this October into my 11th year." It's just incredible when you
Time
have
flies when you're having fun.
absolutely not only time flies when you're having fun, but uh time flies when you're making history. Because when I started
Yes.
this, you were one of the first ones I called. You said to just go with it and damn be everyone that gets in your way or everything that gets in your way. Well,
I
yesterday's
remember.
episode, I celebrated my daughter's birthday, even though she's not here with us. She would have been 11. And you were one of the
I'm
first people I
sorry.
called. Man, don't be sorry. I have her smile in my heart. You were one of the first people I called when Donna was born.
I remember that, yes. And I remember I told you the same thing at that. I said that is a problem for you to have a child to celebrate your life with, and then you were moving up, and she saw your how you progressed, how you were able to handle adversity. You overcame a lot of obstacles that came your way. I was there with you. You were there for me too when I was going through my little trials and tribulations. So we worked through them together. And I'm sure she's damn proud of what you're doing right now. You already know my personal story too, man. I had a situation about 5 months ago. I lost my father. So I
Yeah,
think everybody's going through something right now. But as you just mentioned, there's a smile on us right now because they see that we're still, as I've been using this new word, persevering through all this. And that's what you're doing. And the best advice I can give the people right now is persevere. You'll never forget and you'll always remember and you'll always reflect. That's never going to change. But perseverance is going to show you that you can do this and still go forward because you have to do that. There's just no other way. Like you have to keep moving.
you got to persevere and you got to push through. And
You got to. You have to.
one of the things that we tell each other all the time is to handle this the way Bill Parcells handled it, 4th and goal at the 1 yard line. Strap on the helmet and crash through. That's all you can do.
Unlike the Seattle Seahawks, don't just when you're at the 1 yard line, don't do that mess. Don't fumble the bag away when you have a chance to win it at the 1 yard line and throw a freaking pick right at the 1 yard line and cost yourself the game. Just don't do anything ridiculous like that, though. I'm
we'll
sorry.
start.
My boss is a Falcons fan. He hates when I talk about that. He hates to hear about that. He hates to hear about that game. It's like I'm sorry, but you
Yeah,
get where we're going with this.
yeah, exactly. We'll start there. Did that did that pick at the 1 yard line in Super Bowl 49 cost Russell Wilson the rest of his career? You think that?
I don't think so because it was a call that Pete Carroll made, and it wasn't Russell Wilson's call to make. And that's what everybody was saying after the game. Why would Pete Carroll make a call where you have your best player, two of your best players, and Marshawn Lynch was right there on the 1 yard? You have to give it the beast mode. That was your game. The Lombardi Trophy was making its way down towards the Seattle sideline, and all of a sudden that happens. And I said, wait a minute. They
Yeah.
just threw a pick at the end, at the middle, and at the 1 yard line. Why would you make a call like that? You should have just ran that sucker, at least give yourself some time to run. And it wasn't like they had a rush to it either, Brian. I think they had maybe one or two timeouts left, so they could have had burned one and given themselves some time to set it up or run maybe even the trick play if they had to. But that will always go down as one of the most ridiculous, embarrassing, crazy, lackluster, non-thinking moments in football history. When you have the game right there, gift wrap for you, and then you do something silly like that, and it costs your team a chance to win the Super Bowl. And let's face it, the Seattle Seahawks have not been the same ever since.
No, they have not. You and I are both familiar with the gentleman we know as Mike Francesa, the sports pope in New York, who retired some time back. And I'll never forget the way he described it. The Patriots, going back to that game in Super Bowl 49, had capitulated. They'd given up.
Yep,
They'd given up.
they did.
Brady was thinking, how can I pull a miracle off? And Mike Francesa said it best the next day: line up, block it, power, touchdown. He walks in backwards if they do that.
That's why Mike Francesa is a sports pope. He probably should have been the coach that day for the Seahawks because I'm sure he would have said, "We're going to run this thing. We're at the 1 yard line, and the game's right there, and the championship is right there for us. You give it to your best running back out there, and just let him just power that sucker in, and then that's it. And then Seattle would have won and Russell would have had 2 championships, not just
Instead of
one.
just one. Instead of just one.
I
There's a
don't want to. I don't want to play conspiracy theorist, Brian, but that game always perplexes me as how that all unfolded. I don't
yeah,
know. I just don't
perplex
understand it.
it'll perplex me forever and how all that unfolded. Speaking of unfolding, earlier in this week, um a bunch of friends and I talked about the Pro Football Hall of Fame, the inductions therein, and there is one name, two actually, that will never. I've just conceded the fact that they will never ever get their due, even though they each have won 3 titles, they each were on the same team, and they each have had an impact in pro football. You know the names I'm talking about: John Taylor and Roger Craig, especially Roger Craig, because two other players, Christian McCaffrey and Marshall Falk, had a thousand season apiece. Why don't they celebrate the fellow who originated that feat?
Good question. You know what, Brian? These things have become so politically charged, it's not even funny anymore. You got to look at all. No, they really have, and I really start to
Yep.
wonder if there's some type of vendetta with these writers who make the decisions to vote for who should get into the Hall of Fame now. If they feel like, I don't know if it's a new generation of how these writers do things, because there's a lot of names out there that I feel say that they missed that they should have pushed, at least made a name or a case for them to be in the Hall of Fame.
Hmm.
I don't know, is it going because maybe guys have championship rings, and let's face it, everybody feels like if you have a championship ring, that automatically qualifies you for a Hall of Fame spot. Seems that's the way of the world now. You got to win a
Yeah,
Super Bowl in order to be considered a Hall of Famer, or at least have some stats to back up why you won a championship to be considered a Hall of Famer.
but a thousand season. No one ever heard of it until you saw it happen against the Cowboys in '85, and Roger Craig was the first to do it. And something Victor said earlier in the week, and he reiterated it earlier this show. And you just said it again. It seems like there's a vendetta against certain players. It's like some of the writers say, "Oh, you didn't get me this interview at this time. I'm keeping you out. I'm keeping you out of the Hall of Fame," and it's just totally not fair.
I agree, and you're absolutely right. You just hit the nail on the head, Brian. Some of these writers feel like they've been neglected over the years from covering these players who made these accomplishments and these historical feats that they just never neglected from the opportunity to actually sit down and talk to them. Now, to me, that sounds high schoolish. That's childish. However, that still does not mean you should not look at their greatness and say, you know what, maybe he never gave me the opportunity to sit down and talk to him about why he did this and how he did this. But I still say, in spite of my personal feeling towards him, he in my book is still a Hall of Famer, and I think he should be deserving of that opportunity. Not because the guy never spoke to me when I was out there trying to cover him.
Absolutely. Michael Lyle joining us here as we revive the Lyle files here this morning on this Thursday edition of Snowman in the Morning. And I'll tell you what, man, there's conspiracy theories all over the place. There are conspiracy theories all over sports. And you said it best just a moment ago. Sports has been so politically charged, especially lately, that the purity of watching sports, taking it in, and enjoying sports has just gone right out the window.
Brian, and I am a staunch supporter of freedom of speech. You know that. We've talked about this before.
Yep.
I have no problem with anybody using the platform to express how they feel about life. about race relations, about whatever goes on in the world. Because let's face it, we're both blessed to be doing these jobs, and I know that we have our experiences, and we've talked about some of the things that we see that we don't like or what we
Hmm.
experienced. But I do understand the one thing though, and I feel like this in our profession, especially I'm gonna put myself in the spotlight here. For example, when I'm out here covering stories or doing newscasts, and we're talking about politics and war and poverty and all the kinds of not so great things that's going on right now in this universe, you look
Hmm.
to sports as a way to escape that. In fact, I was at a function last night out here in Boulder, I mean, in Fort Collins, and I was talking to some listeners, and I told them, listen, one of the things I do with my job is that I enjoy sports. When I'm finished doing newscasts and talking about politics and whatever else is going on, I go home or I go to sporting events because that is my way of decompressing from having to talk about tragedies and not so great news all the time.
Right.
That's my escape. Now, what you're saying, and I agree, I want to enjoy the game. I don't want to have to feel like I listen to a repeat of something else while the game is on. You see where I'm going with this? I want to
Yes, sir.
relax and watch or listen. In my case, I like to listen because I have an app that I listen to. I'm a radio nerd, so what can I say? But
Same. Same.
and that's cool, and that makes us unique in a sense. So that's fine. But my point is that I'm trying to enjoy myself away from all that talk, but yet sometimes it still finds its way into sports. Fine, but can I please enjoy maybe a good hour or two of a game where I have to talk about politics while we're listening to a game or watching it? I think that can help us out somewhat, and then maybe we won't be so like the universe is right now, so angry and so bitter and unhappy with things. And maybe we need these breaks when we're not talking about them. When things like sports should be entertainment and relaxing and just enjoying something, where it's not talking about the Biden and Trump, not talking about homelessness, not talking about the war in Gaza and everything else going on. That's just my take on it. Now I know that might some people may not agree or disagree, but that's their prerogative. I'm standing on my convictions and I'm standing on business, like the kids would say today. So that's how I feel.
I'm
You
standing
feel the
on
same way,
business
I'm sure.
myself. You darn it. As a fellow who's been homeless, man, please, do you know how many times I've been to I'm from Chicago, as y'all know. You know how many times I've been to the United Center to escape my problems, to take in a game, whether it be a high school game or a college game, as I've seen a couple of University of Illinois games at the UC, or had the pleasure of covering the Bulls for 4 years.
The greatest
That's
player of
my
all time going to watch that. I'm sure that made
yeah.
you feel more at peace with things in life, having to watch greatness in
It
front of you and getting
it
away from
it
that.
did, man. It did. That night, that 97, 98 year when I was going through all sorts of personal hell, being able to go watch the greatest player ever just for a couple of hours to take my mind off of things. And then me being a radio nerd myself, go on the road, flip on the radio, and I hear the voice that got me into sportscasting. You know him well, Mr. Jim Durham.
Jim Durham, that's right, JD, good old JD, who was
And
once my colleague at ESPN Radio because he called the games for the ESPN NBA broadcast too. So I got to meet
yep.
JD a couple of times.
Was it fun talking to JD?
Oh,
Was
he was awesome. He was
he
great.
as cool as I thought he was?
He was fun to work with, dude. If you got a chance to sit down with some of these legendary broadcasters like a JD, you felt like you could sit there for hours and just listen to how he dissects a game, how he prepares, how he's his strategy, his way that he approaches the job. It's like, wow, I could sit here for hours and he doesn't have to call the game. I'll just sit there and just take notes like I'm in a classroom of learning how to become a broadcaster. You don't have to go to school. You can just listen to JD talk for about 2 hours and then you will probably have so much knowledge that an encyclopedia couldn't hold a candle to this guy.
First game I ever heard with JD. First game I ever heard with JD was 1985, spring of '85, on WIND in Chicago. They were playing the Milwaukee Bucks and Sidney Moncrief. And don't get me started on the old school. We'll touch that in a few minutes.
Yes, because we
Um,
both know.
we, if you know, you know, as the
You know
popular
who my
phrase
favorite
goes.
broadcaster is too, by the way, and I'm not even a Lakers fan, but I always admire and I do listen and I do watch and I learn from Francis Dale Chick Hearn, bless his
Francis
soul.
Chick Hearn,
But
yes.
he made the games just as exciting as well, and that's why I studied watching his games too, because his
I had
vernacular is what makes it so important. Now, all the vernacular here in basketball today, by the way, is what these kids don't understand. Snowman, a lot of the vernacular here in basketball was started from guys like JD and Chick
mhm,
Hearn and John Sterling and Marv
yep,
Albert.
and Marv
It's like
Albert.
Where did you think you guys thought you just made these terms up? No, go back and read your history about broadcasting in sports and in particular basketball. They were the ones who originated all that terminology and vernacular you hear in the sports world today.
And Chick Hearn was one of the first ones to call the distance of a jump shot.
That's
And it was
right. He was a measure. He measured every shot at 16, and a lot of doing it now. It's like, nope, that was a Chick Hearn.
Mhm.
That was Chick Hearn's way. He invented that, which
And
made it more compelling because he was calling the games. They were simulcasting the games. Remember, the Lakers games were simulcast on radio and TV. So he had to paint the picture while people were listening or watching, so they knew exactly how far the ball was being shot from.
here's another one, Hot Rod
But that
Hundley.
era with Lakers, exactly. Oh, that's
Hot,
right.
Hot
Hot
Rod
Rod.
Hundley, the
Who
voice of
could
the
forget
Utah,
about Hot Rod, the Jazz
longtime
broadcaster?
voice of the Utah, longtime voice of the Utah Jazz. Johnny Mose, longtime voice of the Boston Celtics. I mean, this is when the simulcast.
Johnny Most. Yep, good old Johnny Most. Yep.
I made this comparison to a lot of the young people that I mentor now. The simulcast of today was started back when you and I were growing up listening to basketball.
That's right. Because a lot of people didn't have access to televisions back then either. That's the thing. So there was a
Right.
way you could listen to the games, and then when the games became available on TV, well, yeah, but now you need an outlet to have radio and television at the same video team and a TV team. They had their
Yeah.
team. Call it
Yeah.
like you're on the radio
Absolutely.
and I'm watching on TV. That's how they did it.
Absolutely.
Now they have a
And
radio, and now they have a radio team, and they have a TV team, and it's like, okay, well, that's great, but if you want a full feel of what it's like to listen to and watch it, because honestly, I like to listen to some of the games when they were simulcast on the radio broadcast. If I'm
mhm.
watching the TV game, that's why I turn on the radio when I'm watching TV when I'm watching the sports. I put the TV on mute and put the radio on, and I like to listen to it because I feel like that's how it sounds when I'm watching it on TV. I like to hear
Yep.
the actual description of each play. I
Yep.
don't want to just hear guys commentating between the plays while I'm watching. I want to hear them make a discussion, breaking it down like if I'm watching it or listening on the radio. I like that. I think that style, old school wise, is what I think is lacking a little bit today in this sport.
It really is. And I had the pleasure of meeting two of my heroes in Chicago. Wayne Larrabee, who's now the longtime voice of the Packers. Of course, he was the longtime voice of the Chicago Bears, radio voice of the Chicago Bears, and John Rooney, from the White Sox. I will carry those old school styles, tactics, and methods with me until I hang up the microphone. I am not changing for anybody. I've had so many people talk to me and tell me they love listening to my games. All they have to do is just close their eyes and they can imagine what's happening on the floor because I've been complimented of being told I put them right in there. I put them right in the middle of the action. Well, that's what you're supposed to do. That's what I'm feeling. That's what you're supposed to do. You got to make the fans who can't be there be there.
And that's what the fans want, though, and they want to be entertained. And that's what, again, that's why you have all these apps now, Brian. I mean, when I'm at work, I got the MLB app. I'm listening to the games. I'm not even watching. Somebody says to me, I have MLB TV. I said, I have MLB audio because I'm a radio guy. I like
Yep.
to listen to the play by play of the actual description of a baseball game while I'm working. And actually, I could paint that picture a la Vin Scully
Mm-hmm.
because, and a la John Sterling. That's why I
Yes.
listen to him on the radio because I know they paint the picture and I can visualize what I have to watch a TV screen, what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so, and there's no sport I don't think that is more articulated than baseball
In baseball.
because you gotta look at how you watch the game on TV, but look at how the preparation of these players are. They gotta go on the windup, the stretch. They gotta look at the entire field. It's like they gotta dissect every little thing that's going on in an instant. There's no break in between that.
Nope.
Unless and now with the speed in the game now that they sped up the game now, so it's a little more faster paced than it was in the previous years.
Mm-hmm.
So the games are a lot quicker now. Even
When
so, it still
when I
makes
do
it
my
fun to listen
base
to it like that.
when I do my baseball, I don't look at the pitch clock. The hell with that. I don't look at the pitch clock. I stay with the old school. Like you said, Vin Scully, John Sterling, for a long time, Don Sutton in Atlanta,
Sutton, yep.
Chip Carey in Atlanta, John Rooney, as I mentioned before. Um,
Mr. Baseball,
yeah,
Bob
Bob
Uecker.
Uecker, longtime voice of the Milwaukee Brewers. You can't go wrong with that simple old school method that a lot of schools today, and you know this from being a professor for a while, are trying to teach. But the best way to learn it is to do it.
to do it and to what I call also study it. See, because
Yes.
everybody's going to try and be something that they can't be. And I try to tell everybody one thing about this business, and you know this. This is why it's called the Lyle Files. It's called originality. Be
Yes.
original. Find a way to be unique. You can always listen to someone else's style and maybe try and copy, but you can never duplicate somebody's way of doing it. You can try and emulate your own form of doing it the way that works for you.
Mm-hmm.
You have a unique style of doing work, and as well as I do. And I
Yep.
tell these kids all the time, you got to find a way that it makes you unique as a person. Everybody's going to try and be the same way, but ultimately it's going to be the way that you approach it. I have my way of doing it, and you have your way of doing it. That's why we've been in this business a long time.
It's
Think
like,
about it.
and we talked about it just a few moments ago. Today's YouTube simulcasts represent what we've already known and have already seen for many years. I mean, for me in Chicago, it didn't matter if the game was on WFLD or if it was on Sports Vision. And yes, I said Sports Vision and
I
not
know.
Sports
I remember
Channel.
Sports Vision. It was the Prelude to Sports Channel.
Yep,
The Prelude to
it was
Sports Channel. Yep.
Prelude to Sport. It was the Prelude to Sports Channel. Sports Vision always carried the
Jersey,
Bulls, carried
we
the ball
had
in the Bulls.
what was called sports. It was called Sports Channel for many years before we had MSG
Mm-hmm.
and. But see how I reminisce about the old days. That's what's going on now. And what I'm saying here, if you follow me, just follow me here for a second. My point is, all the regional sports networks you see are going under right now because of all the underspending. You see a lot of these teams now, Brian, are going the old school approach now. A lot of the
Yep.
teams are now putting their games back on over-the-air television
Yes.
because the regional sports network model is broken.
Mm-hmm.
Case being point out here in Colorado, where the Rockies they lost their TV rights there with AT&T Sportsnet Rocky Mountain after last season. So
Yep.
Major League Baseball took over the broadcast rights to put them on a stream, but we're still waiting to hear if they're going to put them on cable TV so that we can watch the games on TV and not have to be in front of the computer.
Mm-hmm.
Because the years of the regional sports network model, Brian, were maybe they were good, but people were overspending and the business was getting shaky with it. And now all of a sudden, here we are looking at it, and we're sitting here talking about the old school ways of watching games and listening to the radio. Well, it's 2024, bro, and I'm think we are taking a trip back down memory lane, and we're seeing the hands go back a little bit now because all these teams are starting to put their games on over-the-air television the way it should be, if you ask me, because cable's
Yes.
becoming more expensive, and people don't
Yep.
want to spend that kind of money. So yeah, and these teams just have a lot of money they can afford to air. And if you're a diehard fan, you should be allowed to watch your team and not having to spend or shell out millions of dollars or whatever the cost is just to watch a game. Make them
Right.
available like they did back in the old days.
Yeah. You have to make them available. Speaking of old school, the connection that I have with this gentleman, one of the first conversations we had, I will never forget one of the first names that was mentioned between us. I mentioned the Milwaukee Bucks from the 80s, and I didn't know who was going to mention it first, either he or I, but the name Sidney Moncrief crept into the conversation.
Yes. Sidney Moncrief. Do I not remember that guy, Sidney Moncrief? Wow. Now we're really going back in the hands of time here, bro. It's Sidney Moncrief, one of the proud possessions that Milwaukee Bucks had when they were surging in those early days, post the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar era, by the way.
Yep. And what
And yeah,
a lot of these kids today that think they study basketball don't realize, the first two winners of the defensive player of the year was Sidney Moncrief.
Brian, don't get me started now. Don't get.
That's
We just
why
said we
that's
just said
exactly
who the
why I
greatest
rolled
player
the
of all
carpet out
time
for you.
was. We just said about 10 minutes ago who the greatest player of all time is. Again, let me just emphasize. I have no disrespect towards LeBron, Raymond James. I have
Yep.
no disrespect to him. He's a great player. He scored 40,000 points. It's phenomenal. But
Mhm.
I still say hands down, and I still have these little debates with some of these kids out here today. I still say the greatest player of all time is Michael Jeffrey Jordan. And I say, if you want proof, go back and watch YouTube. You got these apps on your phone. Go back and watch videos of when Michael was playing. In fact, I was watching a couple months back, Brian. Michael was playing in the 1984 Olympics. The head coach
Yes.
was Robert Montgomery Knight. Bobby Knight, God
Oh,
bless his soul too.
oh,
And he
God
even said
bless
so.
Bob.
Yeah, because Bobby Knight was one of my favorites. He was one of my
Yes.
all-time favorite coaches.
Same
And I
here.
actually met him when he was working at ESPN, and he was something to talk to. He would sit down. He was another one that you could sit down and listen to hours about reminiscing about what he did when he was coaching and how he had to implement the style. But anyway,
Yep.
getting back on the subject here, he actually coached Michael for that Olympics team, and I was watching highlights where Michael smoked and was cooking, like the kids say. I'm trying to work with the kids'
Oh yeah.
language here. He actually
Oh yeah.
cooked a bunch of these NBA players in the Olympics. If you watch
Mm-hmm.
highlights of those 1984 Olympic Games, Michael was going up against the likes of Patrick Ewing, Magic Johnson, and he was cooking them solo. So
Yep.
my thing is, Michael was doing this even before he became a pro. Before he became a pro, he was
Yep.
already cooking NBA players.
Yep. He was.
And he went through college. He had a bunch of college coaches. He had the great Dean Smith as one of his. Think of okay, Michael had two great coaches. No, listen, he had Dean Smith. He had Bobby Knight. He had Phil Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these are legendary coaches we're listed. He's been coached by the greatest of the greats.
Yeah.
And look how it excelled and how it helped accelerate his career. That's why I still say Michael is just the man. I know they love LeBron to death, and I gotta tell you, the Denver Nuggets out here are getting pissed with him because see, like every time they play the Lakers and beat the Lakers, they still find a way to make it about LeBron, and I
Yeah.
understand their frustration out here.
Oh my gosh.
I
I
mean,
mean, Nikola Jokic should have been a
yeah.
three-time. Nikola Jokic should have been a three-time MVP. I
Oh,
will stand on that mountain
but you
until
know
they
what though?
decide to chop it down.
He has something that Joel Embiid does not have. A
A
championship,
world
and that's what
championship and a
matters.
finals MVP, a world
That's
championship and a finals MVP.
right.
That's
That's what
absolutely
matters the most at the end of the day. And
that's
until that,
absolutely right.
not this play-in tournament that they made a big. Again, Lakers won the play-in tournament championship. Everybody's like, okay, that play-in tournament. That was, I'm sorry, the mid-season tournament, but okay,
Mm,
big deal. The Nuggets are the defending champions. There's no victory parade for winning an in-season tournament, guys. And there's no
exactly.
rings for winning these. I don't know if they give rings for winning. I don't know what they're doing with this thing, but you got to do what the Denver Nuggets just did. If
I
you
don't
want to talk
care
about
what they
champions,
I don't care what they do for this in-season tournament. They need to abolish it. All right, because
they're
it's
doing
part of
what the
it.
WNBA did.
Mm-hmm.
It's the WNBA's version of it, is what it is.
Yeah, it's part of an 80. Look, I heard someone say this a long time ago. It's 82 games. You're scheduled to play. Put the suit on and play. Period. Put the uniform on and play. Now we talked about Michael Jeffrey Jordan. I'm going to take everybody back to April 20th, 1986. The footage you're about to watch is from CBS, but the call is from WMAQ. This sequence happened.
With 61, 131, 129, minute 40 left in the second OT. Larry Bird with a ball to the right. Down low right, he plays to McHale against Corzine. Turnaround fadeaway jumper. Rimming no. Michael Jordan the rebound. Here they come again. The Bulls with a chance to tie and 126 left to go in the second OT. John Paxson has it outside left against Seasting. Minute 19 left to go. Michael Jordan against Danny Ainge. Michael on the drive across the lane. Turnaround shot. Got it. 63 for Jordan. The game is tied at 131 with 110 left. A new NBA record has been set in the Boston Garden by an all-time great. I don't care if he's only played a year and change. He ranks right up there with the all-timer.
That line right there.
He even called it, and he stuck on his convictions and stood on business with that call. Exactly. In
That
fact, if you go back and
sentence.
listen, and if you go back to the '84 Olympics, if you watch this feed from CBS that did the games,
Mhm.
even I'm trying to remember if it was, I don't know if it was Billy Packer, but I think Billy Packer was the analyst. He said the exact same thing about
He sure
Michael.
did.
Going to be
He
one of the
sure did.
all-time greats.
I mean,
Hadn't even played a
for
game in
Jim
the
Durham to
NBA yet. He
say,
was already calling him an all-time great.
by an all-time great, and then to couple it with, I don't care if he's only played a year and change. Bingo, done. Argument over.
What crystal ball was he using that night? Because he certainly had that one figured out before Michael even got deep into his career.
I mean, his coming out party actually wasn't until the 88, 89 year, even though the year before he won the All-Star game MVP, he won the regular season MVP. He was averaging over 30 points a game. All right. But it took the next year when Pax was injured for Michael to roll off 7 consecutive triple doubles for him to really announce his arrival. And then of course 1991 happened.
Let me tell you, we just mentioned Robert Montgomery Knight. God bless the man's soul. One of the greats,
Yes.
one of the all-time greats, and still to me one of the greatest college coaches of all time because he still holds
Agreed.
that record. No other college team in America has done what the Indiana Hoosiers of 1976 did.
Rolled through the
Probably
season and won it all.
undefeated. Now, he even said in an interview, I got to look it up. I remember there was an interview a few years ago that he was being interviewed at an event that he attended, and the sportscaster asked him about, does he think that LeBron James was the greatest player he's ever saw? And Coach Knight stopped him and said, and I remember his quote was starting off like this. He said, no. The best player of all time is Michael Jordan. Don't even think of comparing him to anybody else. That's what Coach Knight said, and he said that on tape. And even Coach Bobby Knight said, no, you can talk about LeBron James. He didn't even, you know what's funny? He didn't even mention LeBron in the entire interview.
No.
He had, like, the reporter asked him about LeBron. Coach Knight didn't even mention LeBron's name at all. His answer is, I know who LeBron James is, but I still say that the guy who I coach, and I knew when I coached him in 1984 before he became this superstar phenom, is the greatest player of all time.
Michael
Because he was
Jordan.
in the Olympics before he even became an NBA star.
Mm-hmm.
And cooking NBA players for breakfast before he became an NBA star.
I mean, roasting him. Absolutely roasting him. I will never forget an interview he did with David Letterman when he talked about that gold medal game in Los Angeles in 1984. The stat line that Michael had at the half now, they were playing Spain. They were up 28, and Bobby Knight said, I do believe in playing better in the second half. And he's walking off the floor with a 28-point lead at the half, and he said, how am I going to get these guys motivated to play better in the second half? Michael Jordan at the half, listen to the stat line, folks, as an Olympian in 1984, before he even crossed paths with anybody in the NBA, had 19 points, 12 rebounds, 9 assists in 20 minutes. So I remember Bobby Knight telling the story. An idea hits him that he was going to jump on Jordan for a little bit. So he repeated the line. So he starts jumping on Michael about why aren't you busy setting the screen? And Michael said, Coach, didn't I read somewhere that you said where you thought I was the fastest player that you've ever coached?
I remember that speech that Bob
He
Knight
says,
made.
what the hell has got that? He says, what the hell has that got to do with you screening? And Michael, you know that trademark smile of his is, Coach, I think I said him quicker than you can see him.
And you know
I
Coach Knight
fell
said?
on the floor laughing.
Did you know what Coach Knight said at the end of that? You know what he said? He said, well, God damn it, slow him down so I can see him better.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's what Coach Knight
Exact
said.
words.
Those were his words where he said, God damn it, slow him down so I can see him better.
I can see him better. Exactly. when he told that story on David Letterman, and I did see the speech that you were talking about. When he told that story on David Letterman, and this was 9 years after, MJ had come in, I fell out laughing.
That was funny. I remember that. That was so comfortable. It was like,
I fell out laughing. One of the players that you and I both love and respect, old schoolers, is Julius Erving. And we mentioned the late, great Chick Hearn. Now, someone had asked me recently, what's a call that an opposing announcer made that still thrills you? I believe this will answer your question. Let's go back to the Spectrum in Philadelphia.
Performed a defensive. Cooper brings it over to James Worthy. Worthy against Malone. Pass is deflected. Going to be stolen, I think, by the doctor. Yes, he's got it. Here he comes. Way rock the baby to sleep and slam dunk. And yet another Laker turnover.
That's right. The rock the baby to sleep play of that windmill slam that Dr. J threw down. And who better to call that than great old Francis Dale Chick Hearn?
Chick Hearn.
And listen, he was a Lakers broadcaster, but can you hear his excitement in that voice?
Yes.
Like, wow. Like, that is absolutely amazing what he just did. And they
what
always
I
say there's a problem with being homers in this business. Well, you might be a team broadcaster, but you cannot help but be fathomed or mesmerized when you see opposing players make great plays. It's part of the game, and that makes you a fan, and it also makes you appreciate what you're doing for a living because you get to sit there courtside and witness all these great moments happening. It's like, wow, I saw Dr. J do this, and here's what I called it. Even though I'm calling the game from Lakers perspective, but I couldn't help but I couldn't contain myself because it was so amazing that and every time you see the list of all the great players in NBA history, That's one of the very first things you see is that Dr. J windmill, rock the baby to sleep, slam dunk.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the more signature plays you'll see in the sport because he was the reason why the dunk became so popular. He
Yeah.
revolutionized it.
The slam dunk contest of 1984, when he went head to head with Larry Nance, had me drooling. Okay, even though at the time cable was just finding its footing, they showed the highlights, and it's like, okay, I'm good. I'm good. I can see I can see the dunks now. Now let me go forward and then bring it back. Zion Williamson, in a recent article, said he'll participate in the slam dunk contest, but only if he's an all-star. Why don't you work on your game first, Zion?
There's a thought.
I mentioned a little bit of this earlier. I mentioned a little bit of this earlier in the show.
Don't tell them that. Don't tell them that, though.
You read my mind. You read my mind. If you want to participate in the slam dunk contest, participate in the slam
They don't
dunk
want to hear
contest.
that.
If you want
to,
to,
Brian, you know
they
why?
really
It's too
don't.
sensitive today.
They really don't. Man,
They don't understand there's a thing called work hard to earn your spot these days, Brian. I hate to say that, but let's just be real here. I'm going to keep it 100. They don't understand that. Seems like it's a generation thing.
One of my other favorite
Don't tell them that,
announcers
though, Brian.
was,
They don't want to hear that. They would think that we're being too biased. We're too mean.
I'll tell them as loud as I can.
We're hurting their feelings. We're being too sensitive. We're not being politically correct here enough.
Look,
we gotta play down to the we got what they say. You gotta just roll with the punches here. You gotta just be no. We're old school.
well,
I come
I'll
from the
give
era
him
where you work for stuff.
Well,
and
I'll
you
give him
earn
a
stuff.
sock in the face. Well, I'm one to give him a sock in the face. Thank you, Pops, for that phrase. I'm one to give him a sock in the face. If the truth hurts, then doggone it, you're going to have to take the pain. That's something my dad told me, and you've gotten to know my dad through me often. If the truth hurts, then it's going to hurt you for a while. And it's the truth. And I said about Zion Williamson, you were around when I said this, when everybody was ballyhooing about was giving all kinds of praise to Zion Williamson. My two words were, for what? What's he done to earn all this praise? And then they brought the summer league to me, and I said, okay, one play. Let him do it for 82 games. Then maybe, just maybe, I'll be impressed. I haven't seen it yet, and I'm not impressed. So what are they? We talked about Julius. So we've been jumping around all morning. The Lyle Files is back here on Snowman in the Morning on this Thursday. We talked about Julius Erving, one of my most favorite underrated announcers was Gary Bender, and he was with CBS for the longest time before he went to ABC. He did this one in 1986. Again, let's go back to the Spectrum in Philadelphia.
Out the doctor, he's got a crack at it. Three-pointer, he got it!
How many legends were in that game?
I couldn't even count. There were so many legends, dude. There might have been maybe 12 or 13. And let me tell you, we're even talking the bench players. They became legends.
Yep. Yep. I mean, there's too many to count, man. There's entirely too many to count.
How about the way the players reacted though back in the day when they made shots like this? Wasn't so much showboating after like they do today now. It's like, you guys, they want to flex after making them. Okay, well that's great, but if you're down like 20 points, you want to do a highlight reel for SportsCenter. That might be nice for your highlight reel, but it doesn't matter to me. If you lose the game, it's like it's irrelevant.
Exactly. Thank you.
But that's the mindset I'm telling you about though today, Brian. It's the way this is the new generation of how they think.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you score 50 points. Okay, I scored 50 points, or you scored 60 points. Like Michael scored 63 points. They scored 63 points. He scored 63, but did they win the game?
No.
They
lost
in 2 overtime. It might have been a nice accomplishment, but the fact of the matter is it doesn't amount to a win. We lost. So it might be nice individual-wise, but I'm still not happy. We lost. We didn't get the win. I want to win.
Exactly.
I scored 1 point. I want to win. I want to win. Nikola Jokic, he has a triple-double almost every night. When they lose, they don't like losing. He doesn't even care about the stats. He wants to win. That's why the Denver Nuggets out here should be blessed to be immersed and grazed by this guy's presence, because he's got that old school mindset too. He wants to win.
He
He
wants to
doesn't
win.
care about stats. I want to win. He even said a few months back, we're chasing the Denver Nuggets of last year too, because we want to be better than last year's team. See, that's what's lacking with a lot of these teams. They need a guy that has an old school mindset that's going to say, I don't care about the stats, great stats, but I want to win. I want to win and keep winning.
I want to win. I want to win and keep winning. Speaking of winning, we already mentioned the greatest, Michael Jordan. Let's go to May 7th, 1989. The scene of the crime, Richfield, Ohio. I don't have to tell you what happens next.
Uh-oh.
Sellers has Jordan. Jordan with 2 seconds to go. Puts it up and scores at the buzzer. Michael Jordan has won it for Chicago.
The shot that changed 2 franchises forever.
That's right. So the Cleveland Cavaliers were not the same until they got LeBron, and then that still didn't help as much until he came back the year after 3 years in Miami. But that play will always go down as one of the best. That's like Michael, once again, cementing his legacy right there with another big shot. Michael was probably, that was his 6th year in the league, or was his 5th year in the league? I think that was in 1989. Yeah, he hadn't even been in there for a decade yet. He was already making legendary plays that was going to become etched in the history of sports. That right there is one of them. Every time you look at a highlight, I'm telling you, if it's not the Dr. J rock the baby to sleep, cradle slam dunk, or if it's not the Michael Jordan shot over Craig Elo there, or if it's not what other shots? If it's not the North Carolina State game in 1983, the alley-oop that won them the national championship. There's so many different plays that have become in sports lore that you just look at them and say, yep, that's going to be an all-time great highlight.
And you knew it. You knew it when it happened. You knew it when it happened.
It stays with you because you know it's more commonplace to talk about those plays than what's going on in the present. Yeah, you've seen a lot of memorable highlights now, but some of those great highlights that you just showed, just 2 of them just now, those are like, whenever you start talking history of basketball, those are usually the first 2 that come to your mind. The shot over Craig Elo, the Dr. J slam, the North Carolina play in 1980, the North Carolina State 1983 alley-oop. It just goes on and on and on. Or the Magic Johnson hook in an 87 World Championship against Boston. Those are the plays you always see in these highlight reels when they talk sports and basketball. Those are usually the first few ones you're going to see out the gates before anything else happens down the road in the future. It's just the way it is.
Speaking of legendary plays, let's go to the Superdome in New Orleans. Since it's the month of March, I bring you back to March 29th, 1982. Anybody remember this?
Now comes out man-to-man. Georgetown still has 1 timeout left.
CBS is the courtesy. Gary Bender and Billy Packer on the call.
A 1-point lead for Georgetown. No, they stay in the 1-3-1 with Ewing in the middle. They've got to look to get it in there. You can't with a shot blocker like Ewing take so much time. Gordy to Black. The time, 18. Shot, Jordan, Michael Jordan, 14 seconds. Brown. Look for Sleepy Floyd. He threw it to the wrong man. He threw it to Worthy.
How many legends were in that game? And that was a national championship game.
Let's see. Sleepy Floyd, Michael, Patrick, Worthy.
James Worthy.
James Worthy. Who else on that team?
Let's see. Sam Perkins.
Sam Perkins, another legend. The 2 head coaches. John Thompson, Dean Smith.
And that was the first Final Four to be held in a stadium. 1982. 60.
Did you know?
61,000 in the Superdome. In the Superdome. They outdrew any Utah Jazz home game, any New Orleans Jazz that game, but New Orleans had moved at the time. But people throw around the word legend and legendary far too often nowadays. You want legends? Look at a few of those. When Michael Jordan won the game on the simplest thing you can have, a jump shot.
Jumpers. I'm a fan of the old school way of playing basketball too, dude. Jumpers. You guys, I remember talking to former UConn standout world champion with your favorite, with our favorite player of all time, Michael Jeffrey Jordan. His name is, you might have heard of him, Scott Burrell.
Scott Burrell, yes, indeed.
He coaches at Southern Connecticut State back in Connecticut. I met with him one time. He was the assistant coach at Quinnipiac. We sat down for a few minutes and we started talking about some of the best shooters in basketball. He definitely made sure Michael was part of the conversation. He said he likes shooters that can shoot the ball. Walter Ray Allen was a shooter.
Oh man,
I watch his highlights all the time, and I'm like, wow, this guy was gifted with this shot.
Yeah, he was.
Allen Houston. He said he was another great shooter.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see other
Tennessee.
shooters.
Dale Ellis.
Dale Ellis, another
Tennessee.
shooter. Reggie Miller, shooters.
UCLA. Detlef Shrimp out of Washington.
Danny Manning.
Danny Manning. Rolando Blackman out of Kansas State. Randy Whitman out of Indiana.
Randy Whitman, shooter. Larry Bird.
Larry
shooter.
Joe Bird, Indiana State.
I mean, that should be automatic because he was. You want to talk about selling out crowds? I remember. You remember the 60-point game that he scored with one of my
New Orleans
favorite plays. It was in New Orleans. It was one
in New Orleans.
Call. I showed you the clip. It was one of my favorite broadcasters. John Sterling was on that call for the Hawks broadcast, and he had sold out the entire venue because that was the Hawks' home away from home. But that place was sold out to the court because Larry was the star of that game. He was the headliner, and they sold that place out from the rafters all the way down to the court side.
In a minute. And
do you see why? Because look what he did that night. He scored 60
points.
The last point. He scored his 60th at the buzzer, by the way. It was a
yes, he did.
to get his 60th point. So he could have finished with 58, but he wanted to take one more shot, and he got his 60th point.
Exactly. Exactly. Man, I've had so much fun over the course of this hour visiting with you. You've got to come back more often, man. We got to make
we will do more
files a more involved segment. This was what I just like to call a catch-up episode therein.
This was a catch-up. This was a reminiscent episode. And with me out here working these professional teams now too, there's a lot of things to talk about because Colorado, believe it or not, has become a hot sports bet out here for a lot of reasons. It's not just because of the Nuggets. It's not just the Avalanche. You also got Coach Prime is out here now. I've been covering him since he was hired here. So Colorado right now, my friend, is right now one of the top sports destinations in America.
And they're headed back to the Big 12, and they're headed back to the Big 12, which should still, here I go being old school again, still be the Big 8.
Yes, it should be.
All right.
It should be the Big 8.
The NCAA. We'll close with this. We'll close with this brief discussion here. The NCAA has enough money where you can revive the Big 8 and the Southwest Conference right now.
Absolutely.
Because Arkansas started all this. As long as I've been watching college sports, Arkansas started all this mess when they bolted from the Southwest Conference to the SEC in 1990.
Yep. That's where the money chasing began. You're right. That's where it all began.
That's exactly when the money chasing began because the Southwest Conference, for some reason, that lost their television contract because they were affiliated with ABC for the longest time. And then ABC shifted their focus, didn't want to put any love to the Southwest Conference. And then the Big 8 lost its connection to CBS.
Yep.
Because the Big 10 showed up.
That's right. But you see why, though. They were doing it mostly for the sports that they played. It was the football and basketball revenue that they were chasing, not any other sport.
Right.
And that's what's going on right now. Now it's just out of control now. Now you see everybody's just jumping ship and going everywhere now.
It's crazy. And it's going to be, and for UCLA and USC especially, it's going to be a logistical nightmare. It's going to be a logistical nightmare because how the hell are you going to tell Michigan to come out to Southern California to play when they're so used to playing in either one of two time zones, either Central or Eastern, and they have their biological clocks set to the Eastern time zone, and they got to fly west?
Well, if you think about it too, Brian, you look at the conferences like the Big Ten, where you have like a bunch of schools on the East Coast. I'll give you one, for example, Rutgers. My birthplace. They got to fly out to play at the Big House or go to Nebraska in the middle of the West, and that's like 2 time zones away. So can you imagine those trips? And here's another example: when UConn was in the American, when they were all over the place, they had to go to places like Wichita and Nebraska and play those games out there against. And even with Creighton right now, Creighton's in the Big East, and they're the team that's out in the Midwest.
Can we bring back the original Big East, please? Guys, I heard it. I heard a quote.
Syracuse, St. John's. Yeah.
Syracuse, St. John's, Georgetown, Connecticut. I'm blanking on who else was in there.
Miami was
Miami.
also was
Yep,
Miami was a part
Miami
of the
was
Big East.
there. Rutgers,
Seton Hall.
Seton Hall. Oh man, their classic national championship in Seattle against Michigan. That went down to the final second. That went down to the most fundamental thing to decide a national championship: free throws. Ramil Robinson. Hello.
PJ Carlesimo's boys that year were good. They should have won it though. That was their year to win it. That was their year.
That was their year. But like I said, and we'll hash this next time because this is worth an hour. The NCAA can bring back the Big 8 and the Southwest Conference right now and eliminate the Big 12 because it has no business existing. And they can tell these schools to go back to their original conference, take the Pac-12, make it the Pac-10, which is when Utah and Colorado showed up in the Pac-10 and made it to Pac-12, it went sideways.
They were breaking tradition. That's what's going on right now, man. With these affiliations, with these alignments. It's like you're breaking traditions. Like, why are you trying to taint history? Why don't you just leave it alone? It's like Hollywood trying to reinvent the wheels.
The birth of the SEC championship at Legion Field.
Leave the conferences alone. That's what they're there for.
Yep.
I'll
close with this. The birth of the SEC the birth of the SEC championship in 1992 really pushed the plunger on the conferences and set everything sideways. Because a lot of people don't remember the SEC championship was not a thing. Was not a thing until they decided to open the gates to Legion Field for another game besides Auburn versus Alabama. Because Auburn versus Alabama for the bulk of the 70s and the 80s was played at Legion Field. It was played at Legion Field.
It was virtually a home game for Alabama. Yeah, but
yes, it was.
A home game for Alabama because it's in Birmingham.
It was indeed in Birmingham.
Home field.
All right, we're up against it.
And Birmingham. It's like, well, that's Alabama territory.
Yes.
You know, Auburn plays her, but Alabama is – Tuscaloosa is not that far from Birmingham.
No,
that's
it's
why
not.
They had that split home field.
Yep. All right, we're up against the break, but man, I love you very much. I always enjoy visiting with you, and we got to make this
so
a
much
weekly
fun. We
thing.
should be on these boards where we
have.
make the decision on how they should do things.
They wouldn't like us, but I wouldn't care.
Like you always said to me, one of your favorite quotes was, "Kick the door down and just say the price is right."
Exactly.
You said to me, and I
exactly.
And we had done that, and I'm sure they would listen if they knew the dollars were going to come in, and they had an idea that if we had an idea that they thought was going to work, they would certainly be willing to listen. I'm sure, because you know what that green does to talk when it gets to talking. You know that. You know it.
Pink Floyd's song "Money" is coming to mind right now. Michael Lyle joining me here for this revival of the Lyle Files, and I swear to y'all, we're going to make this a weekly thing. And what we're going to talk about next week is what we discussed at the tail end of this: how to make the NCAA conferences great again. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate you.
Snowman, it was a pleasure being back with you today. Coming from out west, show. I'm looking forward to doing this a lot more now.
We're going to do this a lot more. Back after this.